Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters. I hope everyone is well and you're doing good. We have brother Jerry Kohlan. I remember if still, hopefully that's the right way of saying it. Assalamu
It
alaikum, Jerry.
works. It works. It works.
Assalamu alaikum, bro. How's things? You good?
Alaikum salam. Yeah, alhamdulillah. All good, bro. You?
Alhamdulillah, bro. Very good, bro. Jazakallah khair. So, brother Jerry is going to be covering another very interesting topic with us today. If you guys can remember the last two videos we did with Jerry, we went into the history of monotheism. And alhamdulillah, bro, there was a lot of interest in regards to that topic. And, people had loads of questions. But today we're going to be touching upon the history of atheism, which is slightly different, but related.
In bracket.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's going to be quite interesting, the discussion. Now, on the channel, obviously, as the guys that are watching this, walaikum salam to everyone that's joining, as they know, I've really sort of focused in on recently on the history of atheism for the past, say, 300 or so years. So from the period of the Enlightenment all the way up to modern day. But we haven't gone anything beyond that or past that. Now, it'll be really interesting getting into the discussion of the ancient history, if you like, of atheism. Did it exist? In what form did it exist? Was it successful, etc.? So without further ado, Jerry, bro, kick things off, man. So give us a quick introduction first as to what you're going to be discussing, and then go ahead, inshallah.
Okay, a swift overview is the idea that there was ancient atheism in civilizations, and we'll see if that works or not. Then after that, we'll go to the claim that there was atheism amongst tribal peoples. We'll see if that claim stands up or not. And after that, I just want to give a few more specific examples of how it panned out with regards to the tribes. But we'll start off on the civilization.
Okay, brilliant. So were there any civilizations, atheist civilizations in history?
No. And that's acknowledged by both scholars who have a religion and scholars of atheism. Anyone of any standing whatsoever does not claim this, nor do they try. Mm-hmm. You can say that there may have been cities without factories or without this or that, but they don't say that there were cities without a temple, a church, a mosque, or some device or devices for worship or sacred space.
Mm-hmm. So just so we're clear, when we're speaking about, Jerry, when we're talking about atheism here, from a historical context, we're referring to atheism specifically as the view that the belief that there is no God or gods, basically. It's a denial of a higher power.
Yeah.
Is that correct, bro?
Well, look, what we understand atheism to be is quite simple. There is no God, there is no gods, there is no higher powers, supernatural and is out the window, etc. That's the definition of atheism for us today. That's what we're working with, yeah?
Yep, and that's actually the dictionary definition as well. And it's interesting, bro. The reason I wanted to clarify this is because, a lot of atheists these days, especially the ones online, they tend to, as soon as you make a point, they sometimes retort by saying, oh, look, atheism doesn't deny God. It's just a lack of belief, that we believe there's not enough evidence. And they try to play that type of card, basically.
Yeah, okay.
By redefining the term, just so they're not in the position where they have to, they don't have to provide answers. So it's good that we clarify that. So, okay, no civilizations, but what about something less than civilizations, bro? Say, like we want to discuss tribes, small groups, etc.
So, shall I start off on where I had planned to? Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, there's a book which came out in 2015 called Battling the Gods, Atheism in the Ancient World. Now, it's good that you mentioned redefining terms, because you're going to get a masterclass in it now pretty soon. Yeah. Atheism in the Ancient World, yeah. First, what he calls atheism includes impiety, includes blasphemy, includes atheism, includes agnosticism, and even includes deism and theism here, yeah? The claim to be in the ancient world as well is also a stretch, because he doesn't go farther back than Greece 2,500 years ago. And even by his own admission, he doesn't venture outside Greece and Rome from 2,500 on. Mm-hmm. So his name is Tim Whitmarsh, and I've recently come across him, so I'll have to go over my notes about him. He's professor of Greek culture at Cambridge Uni, and his whole motto is that what we would call the fitra, is basically not a thing. He's trying to argue that atheism is and has been natural to human beings, and belief is not necessarily natural. So, like I've said, his title is sensationalist, and
just on that point, Jerry, that you mentioned that his one of his premises is that he wants to disprove the aspect of fitra. He's trying to say that atheism is natural, because most of the time atheists argue the other way. They're like, oh look, these are ancient people. They weren't developed enough, or they didn't have the capacity to understand truth at that time. That's what they believed in, fairy tales, and now we believe. We don't believe because we're far more. We've evolved to this point in our history. But here he's doing the opposite, because he has a different agenda, which is to disprove the fitra.
Yeah, basically, yeah. His as far as I can see, his work is a polemic against fitra, as we would call it, as a natural disposition. So within his book and within articles he wrote about his book and that his uni wrote about his book, he uses sensationalist terms, which I'll give you a few of now. People in the ancient world did not always believe in the gods, a new study suggests, casting doubt on the idea that religious belief is a default setting for humans. Early societies were far more capable than many of containing atheism within the spectrum of what was considered normal. The fact that this was years ago suggests that forms of disbelief can exist in all cultures and probably always have. Now, if I was an atheist and I came across those terms, I'd be excited, because I think I was going to get something juicy, something solid, yeah? Just like his title, he's exaggerated his reviews and stuff, and I can understand him doing it for sales, but when you actually open up the book, he backs down from these kind of statements, and he has to in a way. Now, he only references one tribe. Before I go to the Greek philosophers he references a tribe called the Azande. Now, listen very carefully to what he says here. He references a very, very well-known anthropologist called E. Evans Pritchard. And he says, in his account of the Azande in Congo, he provides but one example of a tribal people who treat the religious authorities with great skepticism. Anthropologists, too, have found plenty of evidence for skeptics in non-Western cultures. And Evans Pritchard, researching amongst the Azande, spoke to one man who thought the witch doctors to be. After probing a little further, Evans Pritchard concluded this was the general attitude of the people. Now, I feel sorry for anyone who didn't actually go to the book he referenced from Evans Pritchard, because what Evans Pritchard says is a totally different story. Let's roll on, yeah? Firstly, the witch doctors were nothing to do with religious authority. They were a kind of a doctor, as in what we would consider a normal doctor, using herbal medicines and stuff, and a mystic. So they weren't considered a religious authority. And what he says, Evans Pritchard says in his book, is that people amongst the tribe do consider many of the witch doctors to be frauds and solely out for material gain. However, they consider some of them to be solid. Yeah. Now I'm going to quote from Pritchard exactly now. My point is that this knowledge does not conflict with their great faith in witch doctors, because it is believed a number of them do actually produce remarkable cures. Hence, if you criticize their witch doctors, Azande will agree with you. It is important to note that skepticism about witch doctors is not socially repressed due to absence of formal and coercive doctrines that the Azande may have. Now, many people say the great majority of witch doctors are liars whose sole concern is to acquire wealth. I particularly do not wish to give the impression that there is anyone who disbelieves in witch doctorhood. It's the opposite to what Pritchard quoted, and he's quoting from this book. Most of my acquaintances believe there are a few entirely reliable practitioners, but the majority are quacks. And they had other kind of mystical priests or shamans who were higher than witch doctors, who were called poison oracles and termite oracles. And there was no skepticism whatsoever about these, or they were considered even at a much higher grade than witch doctors. Okay. So the guy has done spin doctoring. You know, I'll go back to what he said just briefly, the Pritchard guy. But one example, and he doesn't give any more than this one example, of a tribal people who treat their religious authorities, which these witch doctors were not for them, with great skepticism. After probing a little further, Evans Pritchard concluded this was the general attitude of the people. So what he didn't say is actually more telling than what he did say. So you can see what he's trying to do here from the get-go. You know?
Yep.
What do you make of that?
Well, it's obviously he's clutching at straws here. It seems like to just try to. We haven't even gotten into the meat of things, and it's not a good start, I guess, from the beginning.
No, and he mentions the Azande in one of his articles about the book, which is designed to lead you onto the book, and he mentions the Azande in 3 places in the book as well. But you've got to feel sorry for anyone who doesn't actually check the references there, because he was this close to outright deception with his words. It still is deception, but he played it carefully so as not to go over the touchline, you know. But when you see what Evans Pritchard, a guy who I knew of anyway from other works, when you see what he says, it's totally the opposite. And the book is not about religion anyway. It's specifically about this witch doctorism. It's called Witchcraft, Oracles, and Magic Among the Azande. And they did have religion as well, by the way. So,
yeah, that's what I was thinking. If you're a witch, if it's something, an individual called a witch doctor, and based on they obviously followed some sort of supernatural. They had some sort of supernatural beliefs, which transcend the material realm.
Yeah, and they, like I said, these guys were responsible for natural healing through like surgeries and herbal medicines as well. So, yeah, that's where I wanted to start. Now, the rest of his book, by his own admission, the majority of it focuses on Greece. He doesn't go further back than 2,500 years. He names a bunch of philosophers, and if you actually, some of them I was aware of already, some of them I had to check. All under the umbrella of atheism, even though he admits in his book that atheism as we know it doesn't fit them, but he still tries to spin it. And I'll show you how he tries to spin it, and this is very, very interesting. First, I'll just give you he named 2 philosophers who are actually considered to be atheists, yeah? One is called Diagoras, and one is called Theodorus of Cyrene. Diagoras, from what we see, he rejected all the Greek gods, and there's no mention of him speaking about the god or any deistic, theistic, philosophical type of god that the others spoke of. And the other guy, Theodorus, seemed to be very aggressive against all the Greek gods, and it seems that these 2 were atheists, so I'll give him that. Yeah, but he also mentions someone you may have heard of called Epicurus. Have you heard of Epicurus? The founder of Epicureanism. Now, this guy was known as a blasphemer, or someone who was impious. He never said the gods didn't exist. He said the gods exist in such a realm and in such a form whereby they can't interact with mortals, and neither would they want to, because the holiness of the gods is something intrinsic to what people must believe. And that this state of serenity and bliss that the so-called gods are in is what human beings should be aiming for anyway. And his disciples believed all this as well. And this guy, he actually says, quoting from Whitmarsh now, in that period, those who campaigned for a world without gods could appeal to the authority of Epicurus and Lucretius, who was of the same school as Epicurus, and he even deified Epicurus as well, or refer to Diagoras of Milos and Theodorus of Cyrene, who were the atheists, in full confidence that they would be understood. See, again, his umbrella for catching what he considers to be atheism is very, very wide, you know.
Based on what you said, in regards to Epicurus, well, it's quite far from atheism, bro.
It's absolutely totally far from atheism. He admits this himself in the book, but he still tries to spin it. And I come to some of his spins in a little bit, because there's 2 philosophers where he really messed up. But before I go to them, I just want to mention Socrates. Now, everything we have about Socrates was written after him by other than him. So, but we have to take what we have, yeah?
Yeah.
Socrates was charged with, according to the accounts, impiety or blasphemy against the gods, yeah? But in the same account, he references the Oracle of Delphi, which was kind of a soothsaying temple or device or priest or whatever, and he takes this oracle as being a solid soothsayer. He also asks someone to sacrifice a cock to one particular god, He also mentions the God as in singular. Now he doesn't explicitly mention what being he's referring to, but he continuously mentions the God, the God, the God, the God. And in other accounts of Socrates' life, he was considered to be pious, worshipping the other gods. So, as somebody has said about Socrates, you really have to work to find an atheist here. And thus, sadly, one can see that this article indicates that erudition often does not equate to understanding. So again,
just to get clear,
Socrates.
So he actually mentions Socrates as an atheist.
Oh yeah, in his book and in the plug to his book, he brings him in under the folder of atheism. But what Socrates was charged with,
sorry, carry on.
What Socrates was charged with, I think it's pronounced asebia, and it translates as impiety or blasphemy. You can't consider him an atheist, you know. But again, he tries to spin this.
Yeah, you get. I think Plato, if I'm not mistaken, wrote extensive. I think it's been a while now, but I think it was Plato in his not plays, but in his writings, when he writes, he writes about Socrates a lot.
Yes.
From the sort of he speaks about him. He's mostly talking about his stories in Meno and all of these other small writings that he has. And I can remember reading a few of them where he actually mentions Socrates as mentioning or referring to God, with the one especially where he speaks about him going through the period before he was cured. So I don't see how he could.
From the accounts available of Socrates, you can kind of take your pick. Was he a henotheist? Was he a polytheist?
Yes. Yep.
You know, he's an absolutely. There's no chance of him being
an atheist. Yeah, I don't think so. Nowhere near an atheist, because there's definitely mention of God or gods or something.
The God and the gods and oracles and sacrifices and stuff like. So he's ruled out from atheism as we would describe it. But I should add that in Roman times, the polytheists called the Christians atheists, and vice versa. Some Christians called polytheists atheists. So, like we say, it's the redefining of terms, and it's the spin doctorism that's at play here. Like, an atheist for them was not what an atheist was in 2015 when this guy wrote this book.
Yep.
They were just some brief examples, but I want to go a little bit further into two more examples. Two other philosophers. One is called Anaxagoras, and you can really see what he's trying to do here, because I didn't include his spin on Socrates or his spin on the others here, but I included it here. Now, quoting from Anaxagoras, from his fragments, he says, "Other things apart from God include a portion of everything, but mind is infinite and self-powerful and mixed with nothing. Over all that has life, both greater and less, mind rules." So the term for the deity that Anaxagoras used is mind, but the attributes are clearly of divinity, because he said,
I think we have lost Jerry. Jerry, can you hear me, bro? Yeah, I think we've lost Jerry, guys. But while he reconnects, inshallah, if you guys have any questions in regards to the content Jerry is covering, I know a lot of it's quite deep content and it's straight from he's back.
I lost you there.
No problem, bro. I was just putting you're back now, alhamdulillah. But I was just putting out to the brothers and sisters that if they have questions, I'm sure they're gonna have some questions in regards to the content you're covering, to save them for the end. So I'll give you guys like maybe, or Jerry, if you can give us like a 10-minute cue before you finish, and then
no problem.
Questions
no problem. So we got that Anaxagoras was referring to attributes of divinity, but he used the name mind. Yeah, we all got that.
Yep.
So now I go to what Whitmarsh writes about Anaxagoras. The cosmic mind at one level closely resembles Xenophanes' one god in brackets. It is remote, self-sufficient, all-powerful, different in kind to the stuff of matter. Elsewhere we learn that it is mind that is behind the orderly rotation of the stars and celestial elements, and mind that gives life to organic beings. It looks to all purposes like the designing will of a creator god, yet Anaxagoras never to our knowledge identified it with divinity. This is a significant silence. Surely if he wanted to equate mind with God, he would have done so explicitly. Indeed, he seems evasive, deliberately so, on the question of what mind actually is, end quote. So because he didn't call God, he didn't use the word God, and he used the word mind, Whitmarsh has jumped on him, yeah? So he's trying to subtly, at the end of describing the attributes of divinity here, to lead people away, you know, in a very subtle way by doing sleight of hand. But this means, if we hold Whitmarsh to his own principles, if somebody uses the word God when they describe the being with the attributes of divinity, he has to accept it. So keep this in mind. Yeah, you can see he's trying to be very subtle at the end of the description here. And because the guy didn't say God, he doesn't accept it. Now we go to...
But it's interesting because he quite clearly himself mentions that he was referring to, you know, the mind, quote unquote, the mind that created all, basically.
Yeah.
Well, you're assuming there's a creative entity that's created this, and that again, in and of itself, goes against the whole premise of atheism.
Of course.
That there is a creator. Okay, call it a mind, call it whatever you wish. The philosopher you're referring to here, he's clearly highlighting that there's something behind creation, which is again totally opposite to what atheists today would recognize or identify with.
Yeah. So what he's done there is just tried his best to find an angle, and he's taken a very weak pot shot simply at the term that the guy used, mind. Now we go to something even more clear, Xenophanes, and there's a quote from his fragment saying, "God is one, supreme among gods and men, and not like mortals in body or in mind. The whole sees, the whole perceives, the whole hears, but without effort, he sets in motion all things by mind and thought." And in another fragment, he says he is the totality of mind and thought and is eternal. So he doesn't deny the existence of the polytheistic gods, but he has a henotheistic conception of the one God above them. Now, he used the term God, yeah? Now, remember what he said about Anaxagoras. Whitmarsh, Xenophanes then was not an atheist in any straightforward sense. He was not denying the existence of a deity, but radically redefining it, shifting it away from anthropomorphic projections so that it became instead the explanation for life and motion. Even the one God's mind seems entirely non-anthropomorphic. When he claims that the God moves things with his mind, he makes it clear this is an entirely different type of mind from the human. From another point of view, however, this was the most devastating assault on traditional Greek religion, a religion which was built around cultic temple worship and statues. How could one worship the one God? What rituals would one use? The one God is like a conventional deity in that he is undying and possessed of immense power. But given that he cannot be known and is not of our world, the word God is more of a conceptual placeholder in the absence of secure definition of this entity. Now listen closely. He's done the same thing at the very end again. Would anything be lost in Xenophanes' account of the world if we substituted nature for the one God? Now, by his own standards, because Xenophanes said God, he has to leave it there. So he's not willing to give Anaxagoras the same treatment as Xenophanes the same treatment as he gave to Anaxagoras, or he projected onto what he would have done if Anaxagoras used the word God. Now, I've only gone into his book, I admit very briefly, but I've taken some things which I found to be glaring about him, just to show what he's upon.
Yeah, well, it's another thing that's coming from what he's saying is it's like another thing he seems to be doing is redefining what a belief in God means, and he seems to be defining it in the way polytheists would, like believing in worshipping idols and stuff. And then anything that goes against that definition, he's putting in the basket of atheism. Whereas when it's more closer to theism, or the correct conception of theism, which is the creator of all that exists, the philosophers the quotes that you're giving us by them seem to be leaning more towards the spectrum of, let's say, what we believe about Allah, as opposed to the spectrum of atheism, by a long shot, right? Not there, but by a long shot. So I don't get how he's smuggling
he's taking any form of skepticism whatsoever against any sort of creed, and he's smuggling it into the book.
Yeah,
he knows he can't do this. He knows he can't do this and live up to the claims in the hype about his book and in the introduction to his book. So he's trying to redefine terms, as you said, and like he's trying to slowly EQ away from what's clearly a theistic conception to a more pantheistic, remote deistic, non-interested force or just trying to play with oh, he didn't say God, he said mind. He's trying to implant things in the reader's head, you know. So like his book doesn't live up to, it's inconsistent with itself. It's totally out of whack with the hype that he's put on the articles about his book and that Cambridge University have wrote, as you can see from the statements made in the beginning. And I actually read some of the later parts of his book about Rome as well. And I didn't even include any of that because it's just more of the same. Like I said, a Christian considered polytheists to be atheists in Rome and vice versa. The polytheists consisted the Jews to be atheists. And he just goes on and on about this kind of stuff, you know. It's a very desperate attempt, to be honest.
Yes, it's quite
it's
evident.
Completely lacking of any sort of standard of scholarship. You know, it's sad. You know, especially the reference about the tribes is an outright lie. You know, I mean, but he just stayed within the touchline of not like putting the lie in print. But what he didn't say speaks volumes there. You know. So,
yeah, I mean, well, if that's the best they can come up with, it's not that great, is it? It's not really helping their cause as far as trying to justify atheism historically. And so far, mostly what I've heard of is individuals, as opposed to groups or tribes. Or
excellent point. Excellent point. Not only is he only referencing individuals, for the most part, yeah, these individuals were they were less than a minority. They were the elite class of philosophers. So they were less than a minority standing in their society. Yeah, so they would have been like a very, very small percentage of the picture anyway. Most people would have been flat polytheists in some way or another. These were a mix of atheist, agnostic, deist, theist. And what's interesting is the parallel with atheism today is pretty much the same. Atheists are still a minority. Okay, you can argue that atheism is growing, and it is, but pure atheists are still in a minority, and they still tend to be people who have had a cushier life or an easier life than others. You know, the problem of evil is brought up by people who don't really suffer under the so-called problem of evil themselves. So I just thought I might bounce that off you. The parallels with ancient Greece are pretty much the same as modern society, you know?
Yeah, because comfort, this is the thing, comfort can kill, bro. It's a very dangerous thing. And Allah mentions this to us in the Quran as well. He gives us examples of individuals, groups of people, civilizations, when they receive luxuries and ease from a worldly perspective, they turned away, right? And when they turned away, they were destroyed. And we see this pattern throughout history, you know, emerging over and over and over again. So that's a given, you know. When people are comfortable, they have that sort of luxury to. You're breaking up.
There, sorry.
Yes, you're there, bro.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
I don't know.
Can you hear me now? Yeah.
Yep. Can hear you, bro. Okay, I don't know if it's you or if it's my side, but one of us is breaking up a bit.
Yeah, you're
but
correct because.
It's fine.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you, bro.
Okay, yeah, you're correct, because in the Quran, in various different places, the people who rejected the prophets were mentioned as being al-mala, and that's the elite of the society, the elite stratum. So this rejection does seem to have the trend of being, not always, but being stuck to the elites or the higher strata, you know?
So, Jerry, I've got a question that's come up. I think it's related, hence I've popped it up on the screen. Let me know what your thoughts are on this. Can you read it? Can you see it?
Yeah, I can see it, yeah.
So atheism revolves around day by day, newer and better every day. And religion is like stone cold, stays all outdated.
I say the person doesn't understand the meaning of the word atheism either. He probably read Whitmarsh's book, because atheism does away with all value, it does away with all purpose, and it does away with all truth. Yeah, if the atheist is honest, and I've been there, I was an atheist for 15 years. If at the core of everything, the universe, by extension, the world and our lives, is without value and purpose, it cannot possibly be improved, because it remains on zero, zero value, zero purpose, zero truth. Yeah, that's a fundamental misunderstanding of the word atheism. You can tell yourself it's getting better and better every day, and you can choose to believe that if you want. But again, you know, words have meanings, bro. You know.
Yeah, bro. And again, it goes back to the point. When it comes to civilizations historically, we see that they prosper and they grow and they become great historically when they have certain foundational things in place. Exactly. So they've got a strong moral and existential framework, a base which stems from whatever religion that they adopt or follow.
Exactly.
Right. And then when they start moving away from the teachings of their way of their religion, and they start what you can say, quote unquote, living like the materialist atheists of today, that's when things crumble and are ruined and come to an end. And you see this pattern.
I mean,
So
the suicide rate not higher amongst atheists? Is the suicide rate not higher in Japan, where they may have the kind of improvements that this guy who posed the question was talking about? They have a high level of comfort. They have the best technology, but people are depressed, and worse than depressed, people are killing themselves. People are falling into all sorts of abnormal behavior. If that's the kind of better day by day, then you can keep it, man. I'm not interested. Are you?
no, man. And like you said, you 15 years you're an atheist. You
Yeah.
know, I lived like an atheist, and probably if I
Oh,
was
you did.
questioned about God, I would say, you know, if someone was to come to me and ask me, "Do you believe in God?" I was at the point I was like, I'm not interested in that question. So that was what for close to maybe 19 years of, well, say 16 to 18 years of my life, which, again, I've lived there, I've experienced it, and I've experienced how it can lead you down this hole, this black hole, bro, that you can't get out of. There's
Well,
no
it inevitably will, It
Yeah.
inevitably will. If you're honest with yourself, if you're content to just play around and do humdrum things every day and get less and less dopamine as time goes on, it's up to you. But,
Yeah, and then you burn out eventually, and where'd you go from there?
it's like one of the lessons we sat in Leicester Square with one of the imams on Aqidah. He said, "Look, the only pleasure in this world that doesn't run along with the dopamine effect is your relationship with Allah."
SubhanAllah.
He said, because there's no end to the guidance Allah can give you, no end to the iman He can give you, no end to the tawakkul and all these. What we mean by trust in Allah, we mean faith, we mean guidance, we mean mercy, etc. Allah is the only one that has never-ending resources. So, in fact, the only way to continuously improve is to strive and get closer to Allah. Which I found very interesting as well.
Inshallah. So, anything else, Jerry? You want to cover with us?
On Whitmarsh, that was it, because I just wanted to give a perspective on, because he's the only one in recent times I know that has tried to trumpet the whole atheism in ancient societies. Most other scholars, both religious and atheists, they don't even bother with this, and they flat out say the opposite. I've got a few quotes here. There's a guy called Jean-Louis Quatrefages, who was a French. He was involved in history, anthropology, ethnology. He corresponded with Charles Darwin, and he was an evolutionist, but he didn't agree with him on everything. But anyway, he says, confining ourselves rigorously to the region of facts and carefully avoiding the territory of philosophy and theology, we may state without hesitation that there is no human society or even association in which the idea of good and evil is not represented by certain acts regarded by the members of that society as morally good or morally bad. Even among robbers and pirates, theft is regarded as a misdeed, sometimes as a crime, and severely punished. And he also says in his book, The Human Species, 3rd edition, we nowhere find either a great human race or even a division, however unimportant, of that race professing atheism. And anyone of serious standing in history, ethnology, etc., agrees with that. I have more quotes there, but it's pointless to multiply them because they're all.
Yeah, and the point is simple. You need that existential and moral foundation to be able to build a society and civilization. Without that, bro, you can't move. Because if good and bad have no objective grounding, right? If they're just free floating concepts that are just subjective, and you can attach whatever meaning you want to them, well, you can't move forward. Then you won't be able to do anything, right? And this is the interesting thing, because you'll find some atheists say, well, we live in the modern world today, the secular world, and we're doing fine. Well, what they fail to realize is that they are indebted to religion, because what they did during the Enlightenment. Yeah, exactly.
Who built the societies?
Absolutely. And historically speaking, bro, what happened at the period of Enlightenment, sure, they moved away from God and started to focus on building paradise on earth, but they also smuggled and carried through all of the foundational framework from religion, in particular Christianity and Islam as well, which is not mentioned much, but they took that and they carried it through. So they're indebted, but they don't like to recognize this, right? They're just like, oh, it's our godless secular way of doing things, which has resulted in this amazing progress in this world that we live in today. If anything, the further they're moving away and letting go of the things they smuggled and brought through, we see that civilization is slowly starting to deteriorate, right?
Look, because their vision is low as well. Material progress does not equate to overall progress. You know, like every kind of problem is increasing now. Yeah, we may cure diseases faster and it's easier to get the cures, but the amount of them is increasing. Both physical and mental illnesses are increasing. Mental illnesses are basically increasing by the week. You know, and the stats are there. You know,
it reminds me. It reminds me of I was reading a book, listening to a book on Audible a little while back. It's called "Civilized to Death," and the author mentions he's like, sure, we're progressing as far as developing new medicines, but what's interesting is that we're curing diseases that we're creating.
Exactly.
So we're literally spinning on the spot in some regards, because we're creating the diseases based on this, you know, the development, industrialization, and the growth and the problems that's causing. Yeah. And then we're curing the things that we're creating. So we're not really, in a sense, moving forward. It's just we're spinning our wheels in the same spp.
Yeah, just circular, isn't it?
Yeah.
Circular sprinting, no? Medical circular sprinting, because all the medicines have side effects as well. They're actually on the packets of the medicines that you get. You know, you have strict instructions to be careful with such and such a medicine. Like, for example, I have eczema, and it's known that the steroid creams that we use, they can and do have quite severe side effects, and mostly on your skin, which is bloody ironic, really. But they temporarily bring down the inflammation, but long term they thin your skin and make it weaker, make it more susceptible to such and such. You know, so it's kind of an illusion.
Yeah.
But I see we've been on 35 minutes. Yeah, how much time have we got left?
We can go on for another 15 minutes, inshallah.
No problem.
So, brothers and sisters, before we carry on, if you have questions for Jerry, please do send them in now, and I'll keep popping them up on the screen, and he can give us his thoughts, inshallah. So yeah, Jerry, carry on, bro, if you want.
That section took a bit longer than I thought. So before I go to the claims of atheist tribes, just some principles. People who are serious in anthropology don't acknowledge, they don't accept that there was atheist tribes anymore. They threw it out a long time ago, but the laymen, the general public, still do bring it up, and they brought it up on previous videos as well. So some of the reasons why tribes were considered atheists was because people did not spend long enough with the tribes to get their trust. Yeah. And the tribes were very secretive about giving out religious doctrines and creeds to foreigners because they perceived that it would pollute their creed. Also, language barrier. Even when some missionaries and explorers learned their languages, they still had the problem of the word-for-word translations don't convey the meaning. For example, a dog here in Britain is a house pet. So when we hear of a dog, we think house pet. But a dog for the tribe pulls his sleds, he catches his game, he guards his kids. So he thinks of dog, maybe a little bit of his association is to the dog being a pet, but his dog is a survival tool. So you add that, the barrier of meaning, the barrier of trust, the barrier of time, the barrier of language, and also the fact you had some insidious people, both Christian and atheist, who wanted to continue the open climate of racism to justify slavery there, you know. And I had planned to go into these principles more to try and break them down. We don't have time. What I'm just going to do is jump to a couple of specific examples of tribes that were accused to be atheists, then later proven otherwise. But there have been a lot of accusations towards tribes of being atheists. They've all been refuted. And like I say, the ethnologists and anthropologists of today, they don't accept this anymore. But the laymen still try and bring it up for whatever reason. So let me look for my notes here.
Well, Jerry's looking for his notes, guys. If you have any questions for him, inshallah, please send them in now, and I can post them to him, inshallah. Brilliant.
There's a couple of anthropologists in Australia called Baldwin Spencer and F.J. Gillen, late 1800s, early 1900s, same year as all the rest. And they wrote a piece, like a monograph stroke book, called The Native Tribes of Central Australia. 2 tribes they picked out as being non-religious. One were the Aranja, and they said these were definitely atheist. And another tribe called the Ketija, or Ketija, I don't know how you pronounce it properly. And they said, it looks like these have no religion, but we can't be sure. Now, they came away with a lot of other useful info about the life of the tribes, but they got nothing in terms of religion. In this, they didn't see their own shortcoming. They just presumed what they wanted to presume, that the tribes were atheists, stroke had no religion. However, a German missionary called Karl Friedrich Strehlow, who was also a doctor, and this is the key here, he lived with them long enough to learn their language, write a dictionary, compose a dictionary of their language, and learn their religion in detail. Because obviously, as a doctor, he's doing favors to them, isn't he? So he gets closer to them, you know. So along with another anthropologist called Moritz von Leonhardi, he published lengthy descriptions of what? Both tribes' religions. Lo and behold, the so-called atheist tribes. He had zero success in teaching them about his religion, i.e. Christianity, but they taught him a lot about theirs. So just in brief, the Aranja had a very corrupted henotheism. They did believe in a supreme being, but they gave anthropomorphic features to the supreme being. However, that didn't take away from the supreme being being eternal, the one who gave them their ethics and rituals, that he will judge people after death, where good people will be reincarnated.
We lost Jerry again, I think. Inshallah, he'll be back. This was getting interesting. Jerry, sorry, we lost you for about 30 seconds, bro. So can you just backtrack 30 seconds, please?
What did you hear last?
You started to quote just the beginning of that last quote you were telling us.
Okay, did you hear that they had a supreme being?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, they had a severely corrupted henotheism, whereby they had a supreme being. Now they fell into anthropomorphism, but even so, that didn't take away from the supreme being being eternal, being the giver of ethics and ritual, judge after death, where good people will remain in his presence and then be reincarnated, and bad souls will be sent to a particular location to be destroyed by lightning. Taboo to the uninitiated and the unqualified. Yeah. Now the second tribe, the Katija tribe, also had a supreme being called Atnatu. He created humans, where first humans lived with him in the heavens. After a time, for some reason, humans were expelled to earth, where there were already different creations residing. These creations were immortal. They were not gods, but they did become the totem symbols for the tribe. So the accusation of atheism upon both tribes is completely false, and it's due to a lack of effort and shortcomings on the part of the original anthropologists. Mm-hmm. And this guy, Strehlow, his observations about their religion were cast to the side. Now, this is where it gets interesting. But everything he wrote about the Australian languages, the native languages, was taken on board, and he's still considered as an expert in their languages. Mm. You know, so it's pick and mix, you know.
Pick and choose, yeah, absolutely, bro.
Pick and choose what you want.
Because based on what he said, it wasn't just one thing about, you know, we have this one belief. There's quite deep theology there, like complex theology, man. You can't just ignore it as, oh, it's just some stray beliefs that they hold. No, it's actually, it seems like a system that they had in place. And
like, I won't go into the names and the details, but it's the same for tribes in South America, the same for tribes in Africa, the same for tribes in Pacific Islands, etc. Always the work, the idea that they were accused of being atheists has been overturned. Sometimes it was already overturned by the time the accusation came. It's just that people didn't do their due diligence. Now, to be fair, Evans Pritchard, he was a major scholar in this area, and he's regarded so by everyone in anthropology. He gave credit to some of them by saying that they had the excuse of not having access to the information, but he took that credit away from others and said it's mind-boggling how they couldn't have known that there was opposite information to what they were putting out. Are you there, yeah?
Yeah, sorry. On your screen, did I freeze up, bro?
It just froze for a second. One more specific example, then I'll turn it over to you, man. The Andamanese were also believed to be, and they're from a region between India and Myanmar, and they generally killed all foreigners that came to them anyway. But somehow, I've mentioned this guy before in a previous video, but his name is Edward Horace Mann. He spent 11 years with them as an anthropologist, and he acquired all the tools that I previously mentioned the others didn't have: trust, language, understanding of language, etc. So he found out that they were definitely mushrikeen, and they had a lot of shirky beliefs and practices, but they also had a supreme being who was eternal, all-knowing to the extent that he knows their thoughts, and he enforces a strict moral code. He gave the first man to follow. They also have the flood story, and they also have destruction of people via the flood due to wickedness. And they also, in some ways, they had what would be considered repulsive morals today. But in other ways, they had very high morals. Like they were strictly monogamous. And he said adultery was unknown amongst them, totally unknown. And if I remember correctly, he even said that neighboring tribes would have accused them of adultery, given the rivalry between them, but there was no accusation. And that's just a very brief description of what they believed as well. And I could multiply examples, like I said, but I don't have time, and it's not really of much use because while the locations and the names are different, the gist is the exact same.
Jazakallah khair, bro. That was brilliant, mashallah. And I guess we can safely conclude based on the things you've shared here and things you've shared in the past few videos we've done together.
By the way, if anyone is new to the subject, please dig. There's 3 previous videos on Imran's channel and 1 on Sabur's channel regarding this subject. If the names and the concepts are new to you, go and watch them and you'll get the gist of what's meant. But I'm sure many of them have seen them already, But for those who didn't, have a look.
So Jerry, if you on your screen, there should be a chat section. If you want to just quickly browse through the comments that have come up, if there's any questions that pop out to you that you want to address, let me know. So while he's doing that, brothers and sisters, make sure definitely, like Jerry said, check out the previous videos we've done on.
You'll have to pick the questions, Imran. It's a bit messed up, to be honest.
That's fine.
It's not working properly.
All right, I'll go through them, inshallah. So definitely watch Jerry's previous videos, inshallah, on this channel and on Sabur's channel as well. And Jerry, would you say then it's safe to conclude that historically speaking, for one, there wasn't any atheist civilizations. 2, there wasn't any atheist tribes that we can determine based on the data and evidence that we have.
Yeah.
And 3, maybe there was individuals, here and there that didn't believe. But even in the cases you've highlighted to us today, prominent individuals, from a historical perspective, philosophers that were recognized in the communities, even they, you wouldn't say were atheists. They were just individuals who had beliefs which were different from the common beliefs amongst the people in regards to the divine or a higher power, etc.
Yes, your first 2 assertions were absolutely correct. And like I say, I have no authority to speak for myself on this subject, but the likes of Evans Pritchard, the likes of Quatrefages, they are top-level experts and acknowledge this so, and they say no one of any standing in anthropology and ethnology tries to carry that there is any atheist civilizations or atheist tribes anymore. However, all information came out, and it's still there in bits and pieces, and lay people still try and use it without knowing that what they're using has actually been rebutted and refuted totally. And like we saw in Whitmarsh's book, you really, really have to go beyond spin doctorism and redefining definitions to bring under your umbrella of so-called atheism people from Greece, Rome, etc. And they were less than a minority anyway. The philosophers were the elite of the elite, People looked up to them greatly and what have you. So, yeah.
Brilliant. I'm just looking through the comments, Jerry, just to see if there's any questions. Give me a second, bro, inshallah. Yeah, it's mainly statements and some good points that the brothers and sisters have made. I haven't come across anything that about morality on atheism. We've touched upon that, I think, quite a bit.
By the way, in Surah Al-Jathiyah, Allah mentions that there are people who said there is no I'm paraphrasing, but there is no resurrection and there is nothing beyond this present life, and nothing destroys us but ad-dahr, meaning the passage of time. And in the previous verse to that, it's the verse about, have you seen the one who has taken his desires as his own God? So there were rejectors of certain parts of correct creed through all times, and most of the Mufassirin have said these were among the mushrikeen, and they even had rejection towards other mushrikeen. So like this minority of different types of rejection is not new. It's not new, but it is it's a very, very small minority,
So there's a question here about books to save yourself from atheism. The best book I can recommend is Hamza's Divine Reality. That's a really good book. Probably the only book you need to read on the subject. and it
the
will
Quran,
suffice.
bro. You forgot
Yeah,
the Quran.
of course, the Quran without saying, which all of us should be reading regularly, inshallah.
Actually, there's no book for this except the Quran. But to save yourself from atheism, you have to just be constant in your ibadah, man. It's that connection with Allah that's going to strengthen you against your own doubts, the doubts of people around you, and the waswas of shaitan. That's really what's going to help you. You know, you want to get to a level whereby you can recognize a shubuhat as a waswas, whether it's your own waswas or the waswas of shaitan, and just do dhikr immediately or something like this. You know, because there is a hadith where the Prophet ﷺ said, a time will come when someone will ask who created God. You know, and there's no epistemic response to that. You know, the point is, like, our methods for dealing with these shubahat are staying closer to Allah. Yes, we can refute them academically, and we have done so. Many Muslims have done so. But the foundation of your strength against doubts is your connection with Allah for the Muslim, you know.
Absolutely. Jerry, any
Not
books
so much about a book, except Quran, of course. You know.
any book you recommend for the topic that we covered?
You're going to have to contact me. Any book, everything I took is a hodgepodge. It's a hodgepodge from many books. If you want to contact me on my email address, then I can, but I will talk about these things privately because there is a number of areas of shubuhat for Muslims that I don't want not lay Muslims, but I don't want Muslims who are not so invested in knowledge or not so practicing to come across. Like, this information has to be sifted before it's given out there. There's no question about that, you know. So my email is gcogh.lan83@gmail.com. If you're really interested, ping me an email, and then we can go from there. And it's not so much about any singular book either, because the information is scattered everywhere and it has to be gathered, you know. So
Let's take this as the last one, Jerry, bro. You mentioned a book that you were writing, or the process of writing. So the question about any updates on your book.
Yes, there is actually. I had actually written up to 10,000 words and then stopped, but continued researching and continued coming up with ideas. But I didn't have a suitable place for writing. But alhamdulillah, last week, as Imran Bhai knows, I now have a place where I can invest a lot more time in research and writing. So I don't have a time frame, but the good news is, alhamdulillah, now I can invest a lot more time into the book, into the research and the writing. And that's what I plan to do, inshallah.
Alhamdulillah, bro. Inshallah, may Allah make it easy for you,
But
bro.
it's slow work. This is not quick work by any means. You know?
Yeah, absolutely, bro. Writing a book is...
The writing is not a problem. I'm quite fast at writing, alhamdulillah. But when you're researching and referencing, you're in and out of your notes, you're in and out of the screen, you're in and out of books. It's quite time consuming, man. I always underestimate the time that things take, you know. So
yeah, absolutely, bro. Especially academic type books take
tell me about it, man.
they drain you.
They need to take regular breaks as well for your head, you know.
Yeah, absolutely, bro. Absolutely. So Jerry Bhai, Jazakallah khair, bro.
Yes, Afkar Zur asked, does Jerry need someone who can speak German? Yes, I do. Absolutely, I do. Yeah.
Okay, so say your email again, bro.
Yeah. My email is gcogh@lan83@gmail.com. We can discuss.
Is that the number 883?
Yeah. gcogh@lan83 numbers@gmail.com. Someone who can speak German will be a godsend, inshallah.
Inshallah. Jazakallah khair, bro. May Allah bless you. Jazakallah khair, brothers and sisters. We're going to get Jerry on more regularly, inshallah. Every so often, we're going to do a topic.
Like I say, I have my own little space now, so I intend to feed Imran little videos like this, inshallah.
Absolutely, bro, inshallah. There's some talk. There was some questions about asking whether you're going to have a YouTube channel. So any thoughts on that?
It's something I've been thinking about more and more. It's something I'll probably discuss with you, Imran Bhai, at some stage.
Inshallah. Inshallah, bro. Definitely. I think it'll be a good thing as well going forward.
Some of the other questions that are coming in, we don't need to bring them up. If you refer back to the previous 3 videos, I think Imran, stick them in a playlist because they're already answered there.
Yeah, but what I'll do, guys, is I'm gonna put together a playlist on my channel. So if you go to the playlist section, inshallah, by tomorrow there should be a playlist there with all of the videos we've done with Jerry on the historical history of monotheism.
One on Sabur's channel as well. It might be worth chucking that in because it's
I don't know if I can, but I'll give it a go if I can. Inshallah, it may not give me the option, but I'll figure it out. Inshallah. All right, guys, Jazakallah khair. We'll probably join you tomorrow for a live Q&A with Musa. But yeah, inshallah, may Allah bless you. Assalamu alaikum, bro. Take care, inshallah.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.